Stocks on Wall Street closed the session mixed. S&P 500 closes lower as AI fears weigh on financial stocks. Dow notches another all-time high and a closing record. Asia-Pacific markets open mixed as investors shrug off weak US retail sales numbers. The GIFT Nifty is indicating a positive start for the Indian market. Crude reverses losses from the previous session as lingering tensions between the US and Iran support the prices. Gold slips ahead of key inflation and jobs data from the United States. On the earnings front, ITID reports a strong set of numbers in Q3 FY26. Revenue rises 40% from a year ago. Eicher Motor reports a beat with revenue up 23% on a year-on-year basis. Watch out for the numbers from M&M, where healthy revenue growth is expected. And in other stocks, MSCI announces index rejig, Aditya Birla Capital and L&T Finance to be included, while IRCTC set to be excluded. The changes will take place on February 27th. Also, watch out for BHEL. Government is going to be selling up to 5% stake in BHEL via OFS, likely to raise rupees 4,500 crores. Retail investors can bid on Thursday. Hello, good morning. You've tuned into CNBC TV 18. You're watching Power Breakfast with me, Vinny Motiwala. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in. And in terms of what's happening in the Asian markets this morning, quite a bit of a mixed opening is what one could say has come in from the Asian markets, where, what they're watching out for. We saw some bit of a modest gain, and then seems like Hang Seng has given up those modest gains as well. Now, obviously, other markets still managing to hold on to gains. And this is despite those AI fears that are coming in, weak economic data that came in on the Wall Street Fund. Still, we're seeing that the Asian markets have opened up with some bit of a gain, most of them. China consumer inflation data, that also came in as well, which is less than expected in January, as producer price deflation is something that persisted. Do not forget, today the Japanese markets are closed. There's a public holiday there. But apart from that, Taiwan Index, ASX 200, all of them managing to hold on to some bit of a gain in the trading session. What is the Nifty implied open indicating? Last three trading sessions, FIIs have been buyers consecutively. As of now, Nifty implied open indicating a 70-point uptick for our markets. But a lot of overnight cues that have come in. How is that going to be impacting our Indian markets? We have a team of research joining us to set you up for trade. Tell you which are the important stocks to watch out for in the trading session as well. First up, let's go across to Ekta, who's joining us to tell us the important market cues that you should be keeping an eye out on. Good morning, Ekta. Okay, we'll connect back with Ekta, but let's go across to Gaurav first to take us through the stocks to watch out for in the trading session today then. Gaurav, good morning.
Well, good morning. First, let's talk about earnings. And when it comes to earnings, first let's talk about Eicher Motors, because numbers more or less in line in terms of net profit. But if you look at the margins, we saw an expansion and margins now came in at around 25.5%. At the same time, company also is going to expand its Royal Enfield capacity and going to invest more than 900 crores in that. Jubilant Food, a very good set of number, because net profit increased almost by 65%, and at the same time margins also improved to 19.8%. At the same time, let's also not forget about Titan, because this company also reported good set of numbers. We saw net profit actually coming in line with our poll, but at the same time margins came higher than our poll at around 10.4%. Britannia also reported good set of numbers, because we saw net profit reported, which was actually higher than our own estimates, and at the same time margins came in at around 19.7%. Again, we saw a bit of an improvement. So all in all, we could say FMCG companies have actually reported good set of numbers overnight. At the same time, let's also not forget about BHEL, because there is going to be a block deal here. Government is going to sell 3% stake in BHEL, and the floor price is set at around 254 rupees. Aether Energies, here also we are likely to see block deal, where offer price could be anywhere around 705 to 727 rupees, and the offer is from National Investment and Infrastructure Fund. Remember, this fund is offloading all its stake in the company. And lastly, let's also not forget about Ion Exchange, because this company has recently won an order worth 1730 crores. So let's watch for all these companies and see how they perform for a day today.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Gaurav. Now let's go back to Ekta, who is here to join us and tell us important cues in the market that we're keeping an eye out on. Good morning, Ekta.
Morning, Vinny. Well, yes, the markets did close higher, largely higher on Tuesday's trading session. We had the frontline indices, which closed in the green for the third straight session. We had the broader markets, which outperformed. FIIs continued to net buy, but they bought much less than what we've seen on a net basis. So they just about bought around 69.45 crores. DIIs net bought around 1,174 odd crores. Now, in terms of overnight global cues, the US markets closed lower. The AI impact on the financial sector as well as the consumer spending data weighed on sentiment there. So do watch out for that trickling in terms of a couple of, the AI impact on the Indian equities as well as that continues to be in focus. Asia is largely higher in today's trading session. Result reactions, we have Apollo Hospitals, Titan, Britannia, Eicher Motors, Jubilant Foodworks to watch out for in terms of result reactions. And in terms of cues, we have the US January non-farm payrolls data. So that will be critical to watch out for from the US. Besides that, we have Ashok Leyland, Divi's Labs, IOL Chemicals, all of these stocks which will be reporting numbers back home as we close out the earnings season for Q3.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ekta. But in the final update that we have for you all today, Sudarshan is joining us to give us what we should watch out for in terms of the FNO data. Good morning, Sudarshan.
Good morning, Vinny. So yesterday we had talked about that Nifty is facing resistance around 26,000 level, and that's what we have seen through the day, that from the level around 26,000 Nifty has slipped again. But till the time it remains about 25,790, that's the 50-day moving average, we can see only one side move, that is the upside. And now the door for the record high for Nifty has already opened. And if you go by the GIFT Nifty today, it's indicating that in all probability Nifty is going to open above 26,000. Now coming to the put call ratio, it has increased further. Yesterday it was at 1.20 versus 1.11 that we had seen on Monday. It's indicating you that put writing continues in the range of 25,800 to 25,900. That's the reason 25,790, that's the 50 DMA, becomes very important level. As far as FI's positioning is concerned, they continue to add fresh positions on the buy side. Yesterday also they have added more than 6,500 contracts on the long side. And now their longs exposure has increased to 22%. Also they have reduced short positions by 5,700 contracts. Now short side, their exposure has reduced further to 78%. Come to the options data, 25,900 and 25,800 put options have seen maximum increase in the open interest, with the premium for both these put options has seen a fall. On the call side, 26,000 and 26,100 were the most active ones. So support for Nifty 25,790, resistance, first resistance would be around 26,000, next resistance comes around 26,130. Two stocks remain in the band, Sale and Sammaan Capital. Two stocks I'll keep an eye on. First one, Muthoot Finance ahead of its earnings tomorrow has been seeing fresh longs, and Aurobindo Pharma, there is a fresh concern regarding one of its plants, and that's the reason you had seen a sharp downtick yesterday in the last hour of the trade, and it's been seeing fresh shorts as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sud. But wait on, because M&M is expected to report its numbers today as well. What are we expecting from this one today?
So M&M is, as usual, is going to report a very strong set of earnings in Q3, and that would be led by the volume growth. Both tractor and the auto segments have seen a healthy volume growth in Q3 FY26. Now, margin, that is going to remain above 14%. If you talk about the top main numbers, profit is expected to increase by 32%, revenue too may see a rise of 27%, and EBITDA can see an expansion of as much as 28% and come in around 5,715 crore, and margin can come in at 14.7%. That would be at around multi-quarter highs. And total volumes, if you talk about both combined auto as well as tractor, it has increased by 23%. Realization can too increase by 3.4% YY, but on a sequential basis, because of increase in the raw material cost that we have seen in the last 2 to 3 months, it might slip 1% sequentially. Now, on the segment-wise, auto volumes were up 23% YY and 16% on a sequential basis. And if you talk about tractor volumes, it was up 23% YY and also almost 22% on a sequential basis. What are some of the highlights that we would be looking for? So, company has been launching on the EV front, so we would be watching out for what exactly we are looking at further launches over the next few months. In the ICE segment, recently it has launched the XUV7XO and it has seen a very strong demand around some some 40,000 crore worth of demand that company had seen. So we'll be looking out the launches. Also, emission front, cafe emission norms, what exactly company, if there is any update from the government side, because it's one of the important triggers that M&M has been in the focus for the last few months. And lastly, after India-US trade deal, there has been certain concerns regarding the competition coming up for Mahindra and Mahindra. That also, on that front also, we'll be watching out for the commentary. But as far as the earnings are concerned, as usual, M&M is going to report a very strong set of earnings. And apart from the main headline numbers, look at the internals. Internals are expected to be very strong.
Okay, good numbers expected from M&M. We will get you all with the numbers when they come in as well. Thanks so much for that, Sudhu. But on that note, we're actually going to slip into a very short break. After the break, we'll come back with updates from the White House in our special segment, Trump What? Stay tuned in. Welcome back to Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now let's get an update in terms of what happened in the US market. The S&P 500 that slipped on Tuesday as investors reacted to weaker than expected retail sales data. The broad-based index lost 0.33% at close. The Nasdaq Composite slid over 0.5%, while the Dow Jones rose 52 points to post a record close. Let's go across to CNBC's Steve Kowak, who's here to give us a wrap on what happened on Wall Street.
U.S. markets were mixed across the major indexes in Tuesday trading, with the Dow hitting another all-time high. The Dow rose 52 points, the S&P 500 dropped 23 points, and the Nasdaq lost 136 points. December retail sales were released Monday and showed unexpected weakness at the end of the year, with sales flat compared to November. The holiday shopping season slowed amid bad weather, the impact of tariffs, and persistently higher inflation. That's according to the Commerce Department, as households cut back spending on big-ticket items, potentially putting the economy on a slower growth path for the rest of this year. That downbeat report ended an otherwise solid year of retail sales, with the high-end consumer spending much more throughout the year, while lower-end consumers were more cost-conscious during the same period. The Trump administration is preparing for a big change in U.S. climate policy. The EPA confirmed to CNBC on Tuesday that the administration is finalizing its efforts to repeal the government's scientific finding from 2009 that 6 greenhouse gases are a threat to public health in the United States. That finding paved way for stricter fuel economy standards under the Clean Air Act. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt says the change will come on Thursday. That's what's happening in the U.S. Back to you in Mumbai.
Thank you so much for that, Steve. But let's move on. And the U.S. is actually going to be releasing its monthly jobs report later in the evening today. Now, ahead of the report, White House senior trade advisor Peter Navarro cautioned the public to lower the expectations, citing the Trump administration's deportations of immigrants working in the country illegally. In an interview to Fox News, he said, and I quote, "The jobs report comes out tomorrow. We have to revise our expectations down significantly for what a monthly job number should look like. Wall Street has to adjust for the fact that we are deporting millions of illegals out of the jobs market." That's the update there, but let's move on. And here is former Atlanta Fed President Dennis Lockhart on the U.S. economic data and what it signals for the state of the U.S. economy.
The headline is the strong top-line growth in the economy, which can cover up a lot of sins, of course. And under that, we're seeing, and we've heard this from Jay Powell in his press conferences, elevated inflation readings, which are probably going to continue. We'll see that, I think, on Friday. And a slowing labor market that is not yet falling off a cliff. So low hire, low fire kind of environment. It's a real good time for them to wait and see, but I think they'll be watching this data to see if they need to worry more about some near-term deterioration. Probably the labor market is the more fragile of the two. The inflation rate has been elevated, but it really hasn't been badly accelerating.
And here's Julian Emmanuel, Senior Managing Director of Evercore, on the current market conditions and where investors might find opportunities.
The Nasdaq has really been marking time sideways, churn in between stocks, the memory stocks on fire, the software stocks tanking. What our work has found is that sometimes when you have a series of crashes like you've had in gold and silver and Bitcoin and software stocks, the leadership, once the stability emerges, tends to be in some of the things that have been out of favor, which is why, in our mind, this is a very opportune time to be a patient buyer of software in particular.
Now, let's move on and get you the latest on Trump-related developments. Starting with the first commentary that came in from him, Donald Trump said that the U.S. should have the lowest interest rates globally, arguing that every percentage point cut could saves $600 billion and could erase the deficit. This comes a day after his Fox Business News interview came in, where he said that lower rates are a paper charge and expressed confidence that the Fed Chair nominee Kevin Walsh could drive economic growth as high as 15%. Now, in that same interview, when asked about the Supreme Court's upcoming tariff ruling, he said that he just hopes that the Supreme Court does what's right for the country. And if the decision is against the tariff, he said he will figure something out. Moving on to some other commentary that came in, President Trump told Axios in an interview that he is considering sending a second aircraft carrier to strike Iran and prepare for military action if negotiations in terms of a deal with Iran fail. More updates there. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is heading to Washington and is going to be meeting the US President Donald Trump as well, saying that Iran negotiations will be the first and foremost topic of discussion. So that's a big update that we'll be keeping an eye out on today as well as tomorrow. But that's all we have in today's edition of Trump Watch. We're going to slip into a very short break and we'll come back with more on commodities after the break. Thanks for staying tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Now it's time to get you the latest update in the world of commodities. And we have Manisha Gupta joining in with us as always. Good morning, Manisha. And, the geopolitical tensions, uncertainties, US-Iran talks, that's continuing. What are we keeping an eye out on today?
Well, all of those factors that you mentioned on, Vineet, is the crude oil prices which continue to trade firm, just about flirting with that $70 a barrel mark. Well, EIA also says that we've seen $67 a barrel of an average for the month of January. Now, even as US and Iran are having their conversations, there are reports that US is building military presence in Middle East if these talks fail, and that is what is keeping the premium in case of prices. Having said that, the cold weather has boosted heating demand in the West, and that has taken the natural gas prices also on the higher side. So whether it is about crude oil or crude oil products, almost everything seems to be trading in the positive for 2026. What isn't been doing well has been the base metal prices. With China heading into the Lunar New Year holidays from this weekend onwards, you're looking at lesser buying from there. Also, there is rising inventories in the major trading hubs. So whether it's LME, Shanghai, CME, we are looking at inventories rising for copper and aluminum. So both of these commodities are off the kind of highs that we saw in the month of January. What has continued to do well, though, has been the gold prices today. With the U.S. retail sales data coming in softer, and now the market's waiting for U.S. payrolls data that comes in today, the U.S. inflation data that comes in on Friday. So ahead of these numbers, there's a bit of a choppiness and some safe haven buying returning in case of gold.
Okay, Manisha, thank you so much for that. But on that note, we actually are absolutely out of time in this edition of Power Breakfast on CNBC TV 18. Thank you so much for tuning in. Up next, with Bazaar Morning Call.